this is what's so maddening, I think, to so many people, because they get paid millions of dollars to be professionally wrong about everything.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
In any other field. If you were a doctor, every time you did open heart surgery, they died on the table. They wouldn't keep putting you out there to keep operating on people's hearts. These guys, this is the best Biden. Still got a job. That should be career ending. If there were any accountability in media, if they were there to inform and not to propagandize, not to peddle a narrative, they wouldn't have this job. They wouldn't have this job. I mean, by the standards of being right, they're just completely incompetent.
Yeah, they should call themselves Stupid and One of Them. That should be the name of that as a couple. And one of them should have a T-shirt that says "I'm with Stupid," and then the other one should have a T-shirt "One of Them" with the arrow pointing to the other one. Yeah,
yeah, or have a picture from Todd Browning's Freaks, One of Us.
Exactly. All right, so that was then, but then this is now. Apparently, they're patching things up.
One of them.
Right. Over the past week, Joe and I have heard from so many people, from political leaders to regular citizens, deeply dismayed by several of President-elect Trump's cabinet selections, and they are scared. Last Thursday, we expressed our own concerns on this broadcast and even said we would appreciate the opportunity to speak with the president-elect himself. On Friday, we were given the opportunity to do just that. Joe and I went to Mar-a-Lago to meet personally with President-elect Trump. It was the first time we have seen him in 7 years.
Now, we talked about a lot of
and I called him a Nazi. Good times.
Media outlets. We talked about that a good bit. And it's going to come as no surprise to anybody who watches this show, has watched it over the past year or over the past decade, that we didn't see eye to eye on a lot of issues, and we told him so.
What we did agree on was to restart communications. My father often spoke with world leaders with whom he and the United States profoundly disagreed. That's a task shared by reporters and commentators alike.
My father loved Hitler.
Spoken to President Trump since March of 2020, other than a personal call Joe made to Trump on the morning after the attempt on his life in Butler, Pennsylvania. In this meeting, President Trump was cheerful, he was upbeat, he seemed interested in finding common ground with Democrats on some of the most divisive issues. And for those asking why we would go speak to the president-elect during such fraught times, especially between us, I guess I would ask back, why wouldn't we? 5 years of political warfare has deeply divided Washington and the country.
A lot of you might not, but we remember Robert Downey Jr. ending his career in irrelevance, literally as a circus act, appearing in big tents across the country. And we don't want that to be us.
We have been as clear as we know how in expressing our deep concerns about President Trump's actions and words in the course of public debate. But for nearly 80 million Americans, election denialism, public trials, and January 6th were not as important as the issues that moved them to send Donald Trump back to the White House with their vote. Joe and I realize it's time to do something different. And that starts with not only talking about Donald Trump, but also talking with him.
Okay. All right. So, people took that surprisingly well. They took that very well. So let's see what the reaction they got for that was. Friend of show, Jimmy Dore. Remember how we said Trump was literal Hitler and he would end democracy and be a fascist dictator? Well, psych. Yes, indeed. They seem to be whistling a different tune now. Rafiq, she literally just said he was fascist and that women were going to die if he was elected president. That is what I think our British friends call a sticky wicket that they're in. Ryan Stelter. Loyal Morning Joe viewers are furious about the Trump meeting. Jeff Jarvis called it a betrayal of their colleagues, democracy, and us all. It is a disgusting show of obeisance in advance. Some fans are vowing not to watch the show anymore.
Now, I know, as someone who kind of does this for a living now, I should probably be less ignorant,
Kind of.
but who the fuck is Jeff Jarvis? I've never heard of Jeff Jarvis. Is he an MSNBC guy? Is he like
no, that's
who is
Vision. That's Vision in the Avengers.
Who's Jeff Jarvis called it a betrayal of their colleagues? Who is that?
I really don't know.
It must be somebody who works at
know.
MSNBC. I've never heard of him. Is that a host or is that an executive or something?
Well, Brian Stelter is the king of relevance. So
Yeah, right.
people are clamoring to find out. It's just very interesting. He's talking about the threat of fans vowing not to watch the show anymore. Both CNN and MSNBC completely tanked right after the election. A lot of the viewers that remained, and they've been on a downward trajectory for several years, there was a big drop-off after the Mueller report because you're starting to get down to the dumbest people who still watch this stuff, and it's becoming too much for them. So you're getting another layer of dummies who are just going away from these shows. Now you're down to, I don't know, man. I mean, you got people on IVs at the nursing home left at
Right.
this point. Like who's watching, and they're not even choosing to watch it. The nurses' aides are putting it on.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
in
exactly.
the room. Like who
At 6
who
in
is
the morning.
left? Who's left to complain? Who's really left to complain? And of course, I mean, in my opinion, I think it's kind of obvious. That's what this is about. These shows are terrified of sliding into irrelevance. It's funny because if you handed me, you, the average person, Joe Scarborough, Mika Brzezinski money, that's fuck you money. Who cares if your show goes off the air, right? But for these people, man, once you're at that level, you think differently. Like that money is just a baseline thing that you assume. Being rich, that's not good enough anymore. You have to be rich and powerful. You have to be rich, powerful, famous. You have to be relevant. That's why they would fight. That's why they would sacrifice their dignity to try to keep this piece of garbage show going when they don't need the money. There's no way they need to keep this going. We're going to be collecting bottles and cans if Morning Joe goes off the air. So what do they need to sacrifice their dignity for? That's how narcissistic and egocentric people like this are.
Well, I would also say, too, that I think there is a lesson to be learned and a lesson that should have been learned back in 2016, which is that the absolute worst way to attack Donald Trump is to make him into this foreign thing, this just intrinsically out of bounds, disqualified thing. The most effective tact against Trump was always just to normalize him. And that's something that they refused to do. They refused to do in 2016. And then when they lost in 2016, they thought it was a weird fluke because she won the popular vote and they were chirping about the Russians and blah, blah, blah. With a verdict like this, with a popular vote win and a win in every swing state, I think it's becoming obvious to people that they're sort of otherizing of Trump as someone just, like I said, intrinsically out of bounds did not work, because that's the exact campaign they ran. They ran a campaign of their message in the campaign. It was not, they didn't run on left-wing economics. They didn't even run on wokeness. They ran on Liz Cheney likes Kamala because January 6th was a really scary day. That was their message. And that's what Morning Joe insisted that she run on, because Morning Joe, I mean, look, Joe Scarborough is a Republican. He was a Republican. He exited because of Trump and God forbid, right? But, I mean, he's a conservative who doesn't like the woke identity politics, and he doesn't like workers to have decent wages. So what does he want the Democrats to do? He wants them to run as basically Republicans who don't do January 6th. That's basically what he wants the Democrats to do. And I think they realize that that is a dead end. And so now I think a lot of people are realizing that they have to engage in a policy discussion, because this just blanket stigmatization of Trump and the Trump movement has been a total failure. It has been a total failure. They got lucky in 2020 when Trump basically disqualified himself by saying one day don't worry about COVID. The next day, pushing Operation Warp Speed. Then he gets COVID. He says he's fine. Then he goes to Walter Reed Hospital. He disqualified himself. But there was never a successful effort to make any of this other stuff, the lawfare, the January 6th, the Russiagate. There was never a successful effort to make any of that stick. That has failed every time they've tried. And now it's failed to such an extent that he's back. After all of this, after 8 years, he's back for another 4. So they have no choice but to change tactics. And don't forget one final thing. Joe and Mika liked Donald Trump until 2016. They had him on their show pretty regularly. Like, they were chummy. They were not enemies.
Right. Well, this is why I say I think you're giving them more credit than they deserve. I think it's a business move. I think all of these people are deeply narcissistic and don't really have any principles. They can see which way the wind is blowing, and they're trying to find a way to maintain relevance, and more importantly for journalists, to maintain access.
Well, I
Clearly,
think these
people are going to be in power for the foreseeable future. And this is why I keep comparing this cultural moment to the Reagan Revolution, where, going to what you're saying, where they kind of gave up their resistance and they wound up. It started as, we're going to listen, we're going to talk, we're going to engage. And it ended up with, we're going to be them. Right? By the time you get to Bill Clinton, we're going to be them. This is why a lot of libs would protest when you say this. You know, eventually you guys are going to be supporting somebody like Donald Trump and saying people have to vote for them because they're better than, whatever, Genghis Khan, whatever the Republicans are running. And this is how you get there. This is how you get there. Now that, yes, they realize what they did didn't work. So what's the next step? Okay, well, so what ideas do they have that we can co-opt and present ourselves as them? Because they won. That was what happened after Reagan. It was this purging of the New Deal Democrats out of the party, the silence of labor, the silence of the economic left, and the elevation of identity politics and neoliberalism.
Yes, of course. Of course. We got some more reactions here.
Okay. All right. So Glenn Greenwald, I know there are many contenders, but Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski are the two most pathetic worms in corporate media. They will do and say anything to feel close to power. They both worshipped Trump in 2015 and only turned against him when he wouldn't pick Joe as VP. All right. I know you're not enough of a dork for this, but, Marvel Comics had a series, What If? That was like, well, what if Mary Jane became Spider-Man instead of Peter Parker? That would be a great novel. What if Trump had picked Joe Scarborough to be his VP? What alternate reality would we be living in? Keith Oberman, look, this isn't complex. Joe Scarborough has always been a political whore. It takes one to know one, Keith.
Yes.
Stop clock, right time. You're not wrong about this, but you might not be the best messenger. So, of course, The View, which I got to say, they joke about a lot of different shows that their audience is mostly hate watchers. I think The View, it's at least 50% of their audience is hate watching this show. I mean, even Candace Owens, the day after the election, tweeted out, what time is The View on? Yeah. Like everyone wanted to watch The View meltdown, myself included, actually. Okay, so The View weighed in on Joe and Mika, and as you can imagine, Sonny was not thrilled.
Look, the bottom line is that America needs a free press that is willing to speak truth to power right now, more than ever. And I think that we have to be very clear-eyed when we think about the president-elect and cover the president-elect. And I don't think you need to sit down for 90 minutes at Mar-a-Lago and kiss his ring to be able to speak truth and to be able to cover a story. So maybe they're not journalists in the true sense. Maybe they're saying that they're opinion journalists. But we have to remember that Trump is the guy who ushered in the era of fake news. He is the guy who ushered.
That's actually not true.
Okay, yes.
That's not
Thank
true.
you.
It was actually Hillary Clinton who coined the term fake news when she was giving a speech in the summer of 2016 going after Alex Jones. She called Alex Jones fake news. That was the thing. There's this fake news ecosystem around Trump, and then Trump threw it back at them and said, turns out you guys were the fake news the whole time after he won, because the fake news the whole time was that I had no chance to win.
Yes, but in terms of the overall concept, that really goes back to the Bush administration, where a lot was made of this. They had some terrifying interviews with some Bush insiders that was very prevalent in the press about truthiness.
Yes, truthiness.
About things having the feel of truth. What is truth anyway? Right?
Oh, sure.
Right.
Well,
that's really
shit,
where
yeah,
this
but as
started.
a term, fake news, it was the libs who started using the word fake news in the campaign in 2016. The actual phrase fake news.
But the idea that we're just going to dispense with the idea that things have to be true, we could just get rid of that. That really started with Bush. They didn't invent political lying, but they really did put out the innovation of being unapologetic about it. And putting out the rather Orwellian idea, well, if everyone believes it, who's to say what the truth is?
Right. Go ahead.
In alternative facts. He is the guy who attacked 3 black female journalists. He's the guy that revoked Jim Acosta's press credentials for asking him a question. And so I think that this president-elect, I hate to say it, would like nothing more than to have only Fox News cover him, would like nothing more than a state-sponsored media. And I don't think he can be trusted in the way that other presidents can be trusted. This is an aberration.
But the reality is he doesn't just have Fox News. He didn't do a lot of mainstream media this election, but he went on Joe Rogan and reached 50 million people.
Okay, so Sonny was actually responding to a monologue by Alyssa Farrah Griffin that was essentially to the effect of, we have to reach out, we have to talk to Donald Trump and his people. Now, a lot of people speculate, because she's really been singing that song since the election, that she might be hitting that note because she wants to keep her job. Interesting. Companies realized their bet against Trump and MAGA was a poor choice. The Washington Post and LA Times newspapers are changing their writers to include conservative voices. ABC's The View is panicking to add Trump voices to the show. So if you're one of the people who's meant to represent the conservatives on the show, your job is in jeopardy. Maybe you're not Trumpy enough, so they get somebody Trumpier and replace you. So that might be why she's been so outspoken since the election. But this is what I mean when I compare her to the Reagan years. The Reagan years saw a very fast cultural change. And hey, that's commercially driven. Most of these companies, they're not really ideological. They're not really true believers. In the end, they're sociopathic corporations that want to make a profit. They can see where the wind is blowing. And in the journalism business, what are you going to do? He's going to spend 4 years in the wilderness having no access to the White House while the conservative media continues to eat your lunch. So they're all going to come around. They're going to come around. Now, what do the remaining libs do when their favored Trump derangement syndrome victims turn on them in their effort to do this dance of pleasing both the needs of access and the needs of their Kool-Aid drinking audience? Who knows? They're between a rock and a hard place. I don't think it's salvageable. I think these are desperation moves.
Could be true. Could be right. All right. Why don't we take some Rumble rants and super chats? We got Misha in the virtual booth tonight sending us these. Hey,
she's
Misha.
back.
Welcome back, Misha. Hope you had a good time away wherever you spent it. Hemp Car, thanks for the $5. When are we going to get time away? We don't get them. We don't get no time.
Wednesday.
Time away. Yeah, we have a vacation coming up in 2 days for 24 hours.
We have.
Yes. Yeah.
While we put together Thursday's show.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Really, we get Friday and Saturday off. And this guy, he literally doesn't like to cross the state line. So.
Oh yeah, no, I don't really like going anywhere. I'm a homebody. Hempcar says petition to end chemtrails. Thanks for that link, Hempcar. John McCarthy, thanks for the $10. Caleb Maupin's stream later tonight will be open lines. Come on the stream to agree or to debate. Oh wow! So he's got he's doing an open call show tonight. That's interesting.
You know what? Cool, I feel that we haven't done enough shows.
Yeah,
week.
Right. Yeah,
I think we should call in.
Yeah, exactly. Cool Blue, thanks for the $4.99. Jeff Jarvis used to be a TV critic at TV Guide. Left around the year 2000. Current critic is Matt Roush. Oh, there you go. Thanks, Cool Blue. Rorschach, thanks for the $5. Joe used diplomacy to reach out to a political opponent. What's the problem? Joe and Mika OMG says Eddie Duffy, Hot Lips Houlihan, and Frank Burns. There you go. Thank you very much. And Raul Duran Baristov says Jeff Jarvis is a professor of journalism who spends all day begging to be invited to MSNBC on Twitter. All right. Thank you so much. And then we got one more Rumble Rain here. Mojo Hojo. That's what it is. I was saying the J is the H the whole time.
Mojo Hojo?
Mojo Hojo.
That's a cool handle.
Yeah, that's a cool handle. Morning Joe and his husband Mika can read the tea leaves. They know their show is not long for this world, especially when their show has fewer viewers than Jimmy Dore. Yeah, the MSNBC ratings are really garbage.
Really terrible. And CNN too, both of them.
Yeah. All righty. All right, let's move on. Segment number 2. Russell, this is yours again.
All right. Which one is this?
This is the Kamala money problems.
All right. So, Kamala, she didn't run the outstanding campaign that crackerjack pundit, speaking of people who get paid millions of dollars to be wrong, Joy Reid said, and she wasn't the only one, but she was one of the main people saying this. This was a historic, flawlessly run campaign. Kamala Harris had every prominent celebrity voice. She's saying that is a good thing. Yep, nope, she's got her finger on the pulse of the nation. She's somebody who should really be paid to comment on broad sociocultural trends. Joy Reid. Real cost of Harris event with Oprah leaked as campaign struggles with bills. So this just keeps getting worse the more that is coming out about the drunken sailor style of spending that they applied to this campaign. If you gave money to this campaign, you can't be feeling very good right now. Vice President Kamala Harris's campaign, which spent $100 million per week during her condensed run for the presidency, is still flooding supporters' inboxes with requests for cash. Look, they could have forgiven all the student loans right here.
Yeah,
they could have just done it directly. That's led to heightened scrutiny about how the campaign spent its record war chest and still ended up no match for President-elect Donald Trump's MAGA roadshow. It's like the antique roadshow, but with more red hats.
Yeah.
Among the eye-popping expenses was a $1 million paid to Oprah Winfrey's production firm, Harpo Productions, for a town hall event the television star hosted with Harris in September. The full price tag for the event, meanwhile, was more than just the fee for Harpo. The New York Times, citing 2 people briefed on the details, reported Sunday that it amounted to $2.5 million. That amount is sure to further bewilder critics who had already falsely accused Winfrey of pocketing the money herself. Quote, "I was not paid a dime," Winfrey wrote in an Instagram comment. For the live streaming event in September, my production company, Harpo, was asked to bring in set design, lights, cameras, crew, producers, and every other item necessary, including the benches and the chairs we sat on, to put on a live production. I did not take any personal fee. However, the people who worked on that production needed to be paid and were, End of story.
So why didn't
Now,
you pay him? Why didn't you donate the money? I mean, you're worth a fortune. Isn't this
okay,
wasn't this an existential fight for the future of
well,
America?
hang on. This kind of gets into that. Campaign finance law also prevents businesses from making campaign contributions or providing services to campaigns at below market rates.
So you're allowed to write
basically
them a check, but you can't donate products?
Apparently, yes. Apparently, you cannot make like an in-kind donation of services.
Of
to the
services? Oh,
campaign.
I didn't. Yeah, that's funny. I stand corrected. I did not know that.
I did not know that either.
Like if you
so-
want to put on an event for a politic, but that's weird because don't facilities
honestly,
host
that
events
makes more
for politicians?
sense because
Yeah.
really, like these celebrities who clearly were for Kamala, like, wouldn't they donate their services?
Well,
like, you would
I
think
didn't-
they would.
Well, I never thought that the celebrities themselves were like getting paid, like profiting personally. But you would think like if it's a production company, I would think a production company would be allowed to like, host an event. Like what if you wanted to host an event like Tyler Perry has his whole like studio soundstage set up in Georgia there. What if he wanted to host a rally and he needed his people to show up? Couldn't he just pay his people to show up and work the event like it was any other event? Would that be illegal? That seems weird to me.
According to this, apparently, yes. Apparently,
That's
that is a
strange.
violation of campaign finance law. So the real question here is less the perfidy of the celebrities than the stupidity of the money managers on this campaign. Like what, I read Jonathan Pye in that classic video. He's a British comedian. If you've never seen it, he did a hilarious video about why Hillary lost after 2016. And one of the best lines in it, he says, "It's almost as if the political acumen of Beyonce and Jay-Z count for nothing." You would have thought they would have learned that lesson at that time. Like, look, I could understand appearing with celebrities. I don't think it really helps. I don't think it necessarily hurts. Like the kind of people who were turned off by it probably weren't going to vote for Kamala Harris anyway. I don't know that it really, conversely, I don't know that anyone who wasn't going to vote for her would turn around and vote for her because of it. But that aside, spending this kind of money on that, like what made you think that that was worth the millions of dollars they spent? So millions were spent on other celebrity events and high-profile concerts, with Lady Gaga and Beyonce among those to appear for Harris. Their effectiveness is now in question. Among other notable spending, according to the Times, was $2.5 million spent on 3 digital agencies that work with online influencers. Trump gained a significant amount of publicity stumping on Broy and right-wing podcasts for free. Yes, he did. There was also $900,000 spent to reserve advertising space on Las Vegas's Sphere during the final week of the campaign. That is just dumb. Unsurprisingly, consultants, hangers-on, and other Democrats came begging for cash, and the Harris campaign obliged. This is what it's all about. This was really their objection to Bernie. He was going to drive all these people out. The whole money trough was going to dry up. To other that more than universal health care, more than any of his policy proposals, which they knew would get killed in Congress, it was him taking over the DNC and putting his people in, because what would Bernie have done? Whatever we might think of him now, and he's not our favorite person. But come on, man, he would have fired all of these people. And
this whole line of work would not have existed inside the Democratic Party if he took it over.
That's it. That was the issue. That was why he was an existential threat that they absolutely could not abide.
Right.
That's why we've talked about, why couldn't they have given Bernie, let Bernie win? Yeah, you would have gotten a little public option or something, and then, you never would have had Trump. He'd be leaving now. This is why.
No, he would have wiped their jobs out. He was like the Haitian migrant showing up to the factory to them.
Well, and this is like those parasites who, they eat the bug and take over its exoskeleton. This is the Democratic Party now. From being the paid help, this is the party. These consultants, these vendors, that's the party. It's a big grift.
Yeah.
To other party committees, like the Democratic Party in Philadelphia, for example, a total of near 25 million was given. Some Harris pals and allies got in on the largest too. Talk show host Areva Martin earned 200,000 as a media consultant and toured swing states for Harris in October, the Times said. Journalist and commentator Roland Martin, who hosts a streaming show for his New Vision Media, earned $350,000 in September for a media buy, telling the Times it was for advertising and that more should have been spent on Black-owned media. The Times said that the Harris campaign likely spent close to $600 million on producing and buying media ads for television and digital. It's like the old story about the Chicago ad man. The dog food producer comes and says, we've tried everything and we can't sell it. He says, maybe the dogs don't like the food.
Right.
The Democratic National Committee's finance chair said he will push for an introspective study and analysis of how Harris's campaign blew through $1.5 billion. In a note to the party's top fundraisers sent Friday, Chris Korg wrote the campaign getting routed by Trump in all 7 swing states shocked us all and said the DNC will need to take a hard look at how it is structured. Yeah, that's what we call pulling in Israel. We're going to investigate.
Yeah,
We're going.
yeah, exactly,
we are going to write a very thorough report on this. Meanwhile, emails asking for donors to give to the Harris Fight Fund are still going out as spending decisions during the race are being relitigated. Harris did outperform in swing states over national results, which some of her allies have used to argue as proof she was an able campaigner. Okay. There is not a single expenditure in a different spot that would have changed the outcome of the race. Now, that may very well be true, so you could have saved yourself the $1 billion, right?
Well, I mean, another way to look at it, that last piece there, well, she outperformed the average in swing states. I mean, what that tells you is that she was weaker than they expected in solid blue states, which she was. I mean, she won Illinois by single digits. She won New York by only 11 points, 11 or 12 points. So yeah, she underperformed in the blue states. Now, you could say there that the campaigning made a difference in the swing states. Well, campaigning always makes a difference. If it didn't, you wouldn't do it. Right. But to say that, well, she really shit the bed in Illinois, too. So that means you really can't, bust our balls too much over this waste of money in the swing states. Like the whole campaign was just make work. I mean, it really feels like in retrospect, they kind of knew they were going to lose all along. And they figure, let's just, raise a bunch of money
Cha-ching.
And blow it. Cha-ching. Right. Exactly.
Look,
let's get paid at least.
Listen. Well, tell them it's the politics of joy. They'll eat that up.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah.
The donors will love that. There is not a single expenditure in a different spot that would have changed the outcome of the race, Bakari Sellers, a Harris ally and former member of the South Carolina House of Representatives, told the Times. We had so much money, it was hard to get it out the door. God, these morons who wrote checks to these people. I was getting those. I couldn't report it as junk enough to not keep getting those texts to donate to the Harris campaign. Emergency alert, 400% matching donation if you donate by midnight every freaking day. So Kamala Harris, here's how they spent their money. Kamala Harris blew 6 figures on building the set for disastrous Call Her Daddy podcast interview. And this, by the way, is because Harris wouldn't just fly to her set, which is already built. She had to make her come to her, kind of like what she tried to do with Rogan, and he refused.
Right.
So they spent $100,000 to build this set that people's estimates of what this should have cost to build range from about $6,000 to $20,000, assuming union labor. 100,000, that's just, you just got it to burn. And you're not even asking any questions about costs. So this was on. This is one of the big donors and bundlers for the campaign. She's been making the rounds. Lindy Lee, and talking about how horrified she is, especially because as a bundler, she's well connected and got other people with money to donate.
Yep.
Look this up because it's all public records. Oprah today is denying that she got paid $1 million, but it's right there in public records. You can see $1 million going to Harpo, which is her production company, $1.8 million for Eminem, $3 million to Lizzo, $5 million to Meg the Stallion. What does it make you think about the way they spent $1 billion?
If my donors had known that in advance, they wouldn't have given. This is just ridiculous. And I'm sorry to say that. Well, every time I criticize something, I can just hear, I can just feel the knives being thrown in my back, because it's like a very insular community. But again, at this point in my life, we're not allowed to curse here, right? I don't care. This is just the right thing to do. Can you imagine people giving $25 or $50 and it means so much to them, and they see that money was used to build a fake set or to give it to a billionaire like Oprah?
Yeah. They're going to have a hard time, I suspect, getting the real money people to give them money next time. Like, they are really, really screwed. And this is going back to the Morning Joe thing. They know it. They know where the winds are blowing. Is the Democratic Party even going to be a going interest in the next 10 years? I don't know. I think their donors feel very burned, and their neoliberal philosophy and the contradiction at the heart of it, trying to be a Wall Street owned party, claiming to be a left party, it finally all came apart. It came apart. Now, where do they go from here? Where do they go? You got the super wealthy donors. In the end, they're rich and they want to stay that way. They're going to go align themselves with Trump and his allies. You're going to lose a lot of those people. And the ones who genuinely have these liberal convictions, how are you going to convince them again that the Democratic Party is a proper steward for those convictions?
Yeah. I mean, I think in certain state races in the midterms and stuff, they'll be able to raise some money. But in terms of the next national campaign, yeah, man, I mean, that is going to be a very heavy lift. It's going to be a very heavy lift. Now, of course, they have a primary, so you're going to have, some competition there in the early going. But, I suppose it's too soon to tell what the next 4 years have in store, what kind of opportunities. They have dug themselves a major hole. And the guy who dug themselves this hole, I mean, we got into this in detail a few times over the past few weeks, so we don't have to rehash the whole thing. But at least as it pertains to the last couple years, it's at the feet of Joe Biden. It's at the feet of Joe Biden, who had no business running again. I mean, that's what they could have avoided all of this had he not run again. Because had he not run again, they would have had a primary, and they may have lost. Given Biden's record, they probably would have lost. But they could have said, at least in that example, they went through a process and, through whatever process they set up, which is, of course, we're talking about the DNC. It's not a fair process, right? But they would have done that dance for themselves and given themselves, in their mind at least a case they could make in their own minds to themselves and their donors. We tried to give ourselves the best chance to win. You really can't say that this time. The fact that Joe Biden stayed in the race as long as he did set them up for disaster, and disaster is what visited them. And they can't look back at this and say they gave it their best shot. They didn't. They let this narcissistic, senile, old, dying piece of garbage just run their party into the ground and bury them. And now they, like I said, they have a long way out of this hole they've dug themselves in.
Also, remember, part of a primary process is essentially you're building a fandom for a political celebrity.
Right, exactly.
That primary process draws people in. They become fans and backers of this particular candidate. And then when they win, you have these fans who are going to go out and advocate for these candidates.
Right.
I think what you see here, because Trump, although his demographic shift, he didn't really pick up much in terms of raw vote.
No.
But the Democratic vote collapsed. And part of that is because they didn't have a primary. You never built that army of people who were going to advocate for Kamala Harris. One day she's one of the least popular, if not the least popular vice presidents in the history of polling. The next day she's the nominee for president.
Yep. Absolutely. All right. Russ, are you getting these super chats from Misha? Do you want to pick up where I left off? I left off at Mojo Hojo.
sure.
I don't think she sent us any since then, though. I think we'll probably do some after the next segment. So if you got any,
okay.
Misha, send those to us, and we'll do it after this next one.
There's nothing after that. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, let's move right on along then. Welcome to the Jimmy Dore Show, everybody. Keaton Weiss here with Russell Dobular. Jimmy is on his way back.